The stars had been quiet for too long. In the depths of space, 12 ancient species had ruled the galaxy through the galactic harmony. Council for over 3,000 years. Their ships moved between worlds like clockwork, their trade routes unchanged for centuries, their laws carved in stone. Everything had its place, and every place had its purpose. Then came the radio signals from a small blue planet in the outer rim. Ambassador. Leora stood before the massive crystal display in the council chamber, her silver skin reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. The Villani were known for their diplomatic skills, their ability to read the hearts of other species, and right now her heart was troubled. The signals from Earth had been growing stronger for decades, and the Council could no longer ignore them. They call themselves humans, she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of her people. Their world is rich with life, and they have just discovered nuclear energy. By our protocols, they are ready for contact. The chamber erupted in voices. 12 species, each with their own language, their own concerns, their own fears. The Threx delegate, his insect-like features clicking with disapproval, raised his clawed hand. They are violent, he said, his words sharp and precise. We have monitored their transmissions. They wage war against their own kind. They destroy their environment. They are not ready for the stars. From the other side of the chamber, the Corvin representative stepped forward. His warrior species had joined the council centuries ago, but they still remembered the old ways. Violence is not always weakness, he growled, his scarred face serious. Sometimes it is strength. These humans fight because they have something worth fighting for. The debate continued for hours. Some species wanted to leave Earth alone to let humanity develop naturally. Others saw opportunity in the young race, a chance to add new blood to their ancient alliance. The architects, oldest of all the council species, remained silent in their floating chambers, their thoughts hidden behind veils of energy. Finally, the vote was called. 7 species voted to make contact, 4 voted to wait, 1 abstained. The motion passed. 3 months later, Leora's ship emerged from the darkness near Earth's moon. The humans had built a small station there, a crude thing of metal and plastic that looked like a child's toy compared to the elegant curves of her vessel. But there was something about it that impressed her. It was functional, built with limited resources but maximum efficiency. The humans had made do with what they had and made it work. Captain Torres was waiting for her in the station's main chamber. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and steady eyes, chosen by the United Nations to represent all of humanity. Leora had studied his file during the journey. A former military officer, an engineer, a diplomat, the humans had chosen well. Welcome to Luna Station, Torres said, his voice calm despite the historic moment. We've been expecting you. Leora smiled, an expression that translated well across species. We know your radio signals have been quite clear about your desire to reach the stars. We are here to help you take that step. The formal meeting took place in the station's conference room. Torres had brought his team, scientists, diplomats, military advisors. All humans, all eager to learn about the galaxy beyond their small world. Leora explained the council, its history, its purpose. She spoke of worlds beyond counting, of technologies that could solve Earth's problems, of a future among the stars. What do you want from us? Torres asked. It was the question Leora had been expecting, the one that showed humanity's practical nature. Partnership, she replied. The council has grown, comfortable in recent centuries. We could benefit from fresh perspectives, new ideas. In return, we offer you technology, knowledge, and protection. The galaxy can be dangerous for a young species. Torres nodded slowly. And the price? You must follow council law. You must respect the established order. You must prove that you can be trusted with the power we offer. Leora paused, studying the human faces around the table. Some of my colleagues believe your species is too violent, too unpredictable. You will need to show them they are wrong. The negotiations took weeks. The humans wanted details about everything, the technology they would receive, the laws they would follow, the responsibilities they would bear. They asked questions the Council had not heard in centuries, challenged assumptions that had gone unquestioned for millennia. Finally, the agreement was signed. Humanity would receive a probationary membership in the Council, a colony world of their own, and access to basic galactic technology. In return, they would accept Council oversight and prove their worth over the next 5 years. As Leora prepared to leave, Torres walked with her to the docking bay. "You know," he said, "some of my people think this is too good to be true. They wonder what the catch is." Leora considered her words carefully. "Change is difficult, Captain. For all of us. The Council has maintained order for thousands of years by being careful, by moving slowly. Your species... You move fast. You adapt quickly. That can be both a blessing and a curse. Are you warning me? I am sharing wisdom. The galaxy is vast, Captain Torres. There is room for all of us. But some of my colleagues fear that humanity might want more room than we are prepared to give." Torres watched as her ship disappeared into the starfield. Around him, the Luna station hummed with activity as his team prepared for humanity's next great adventure. They had been welcomed into the galactic community, offered a place among the stars. None of them realized that in accepting that welcome, they had just set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the ancient order. The Council had ruled through careful balance and controlled change for 3 millennia. But they had never encountered a species quite like humanity. The stars were about to become much less quiet. 6 months after first contact, the human colony ship Endeavour settled into orbit around Haven, a world the Council had deemed suitable for human habitation. The planet was pleasant enough, with vast oceans and 3 small continents, but it was clear why the Council had chosen it. Haven was far from the major trade routes, isolated from the centers of galactic power, a perfect place to keep the newest members of the Council safely out of the way. Dr. Davis stood in the temporary research facility, staring at the alien power generator the Council had provided. It was a marvel of engineering, capable of providing clean energy for the entire colony. The Villani technician who had delivered it, a young male named Ken, stood beside him with the patient smile of a teacher explaining simple concepts to a child. The quantum resonance chamber maintains stability through harmonic frequency modulation, Ken explained, using the simple words the Council had prepared for human understanding. You must not attempt to modify the core systems. The technology is quite advanced, beyond your current comprehension. Davis nodded politely, but his mind was racing. He had been studying the generator for weeks, and something bothered him. The design was elegant, certainly, but it was also wasteful. The harmonic frequency modulation Ken spoke of was consuming nearly 30% of the generator's output just to maintain stability. A simple feedback loop could reduce that waste to less than 5%, but when Davis had mentioned this to Ken, the alien had simply smiled and suggested he focus on learning to operate the existing systems across the colony. Similar scenes were playing out. The Council's gifts came with handlers, experts who would teach humans to use their new technology properly. The farming equipment was efficient but locked to specific settings. The medical scanners were advanced but programmed to follow only approved treatment protocols. The communication systems were powerful but restricted to Council-approved frequencies. Commander Blake was having his own concerns at the military training facility. The Council had assigned a Corvan advisor named Thane to help train human security forces. The Corvan were skilled warriors, their tactics proven over thousands of years of keeping peace in the galaxy. But Blake could see flaws in their approach, inefficiencies that came from fighting the same kinds of battles for too long. Your species lacks discipline, Thane told the assembled human trainees. You improvise too much, take too many risks. Galactic security requires order, predictability. Follow the proven methods, and you will be safe. Blake watched as his soldiers struggled with the rigid formations and predetermined responses that formed the core of Council military doctrine. These were men and women who had served in Earth's armies, who had learned to adapt and overcome in the chaos of real combat. But here they were being taught to fight like machines, to follow scripts written centuries ago. Dr. Patel was discovering her own frustrations in the colony's economic center. The Council had provided humans with a trading account, access to galactic markets, and the chance to sell Earth's products to the stars. But the more she studied the trade agreements, the more she realized how one-sided they were. "We sell them. Our art, our music, our literature," she explained to Governor Walsh during their weekly meeting. "They pay us in galactic credits, but those credits can only be used to buy from approved Council vendors. The prices are fixed, the terms are non-negotiable, and somehow we always end up spending more than we earn." Walsh frowned at the report spread across his desk. "They're treating us like children." "Worse," Patel replied. "They're treating us like a resource to be managed. We provide them with novelty and fresh perspectives, and they give us just enough in return to keep us grateful and dependent." The realization was spreading through the colony. The Council's generosity came with invisible chains, limitations designed to keep humanity in their assigned place. But humans had never been good at staying in assigned places. Davis began his work in secret, taking apart the power generator during the night shift when Ken was not around. He studied each component, understanding its function, seeing how it could be improved. The quantum resonance chamber was the key, a delicate balance of forces that the Council had spent centuries perfecting. But Davis saw something they had missed: a way to make the system more stable, more efficient. His first prototype was crude, built from spare parts and hidden in a maintenance closet, but it worked. The harmonic frequency modulation that had consumed 30% of the generator's output was replaced by a simple feedback system that used less than 2%. The improvement was dramatic, and Davis realized he had stumbled onto something important. Blake was conducting his own experiments, working with a small team of volunteers to develop new tactical approaches. They studied the Council's methods, learned from them, but then began to adapt them to human strengths. Where the Council valued order and predictability, Blake's team emphasized flexibility and innovation. They developed new formations that could change mid-battle, new strategies that turned the enemy's expectations against them. Patel was building her own network, establishing direct relationships with individual traders and merchants who operated outside the Council's official channels. She discovered that many species were just as frustrated with the rigid trade systems as humanity was. The Corvin wanted human military advisors but were forbidden from direct hiring. The Threx needed human engineers but could only access them through Council programs. The black market was thriving, and humans were quickly becoming valuable participants. The Council monitors began to notice the changes. Reports filtered back to the major worlds about human activities that fell outside approved parameters. The colony was exceeding its power generation targets, developing new technologies, establishing unauthorized trade relationships. Some Council members saw this as proof that humanity was not ready for full membership. Others began to worry that humanity was becoming too ready. Ambassador Leora received the reports with growing concern. She had warned Captain Torres about the challenges ahead, but she had not expected humans to adapt so quickly. The colony on Haven was supposed to be a quiet probationary period, a chance for humanity to prove they could follow Council rules and regulations. Instead, it was becoming a center of innovation and change. "They are not following protocols," the Threx delegate complained during a Council session. "They modify our technology, ignore our guidance, pursue unauthorized activities." "This is exactly what we feared." "They are learning," Leora replied. "Perhaps faster than we expected, but learning nonetheless. Is that not what we wanted?" The Corvin representative was more thoughtful. "Their military innovations are impressive. My advisors report that human tactics are unpredictable, in a good way. They see solutions that we miss." The debate continued, but the lines were being drawn. Some species saw humanity's rapid development as a threat to the established order. Others began to see it as an opportunity for change they had not realized they needed. On Haven, the humans continued their work. Davis perfected his power generator improvements. Blake trained his security forces in new tactical doctrines. Patel expanded her trading network. None of them realized that their simple desire to improve. Their situation was already beginning to shake the foundations of an order that had stood for 3,000 years. The Council had welcomed humanity, offered them a place among the stars, but they had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed that humans would be grateful for what they were given, content with their assigned role, willing to follow the rules that kept the galaxy stable. They had never met a species that saw rules as suggestions, that treated limitations as challenges to overcome, that improved everything they touched simply because they could not help themselves. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. And the immovable object was about to discover that it was not as immovable as it had believed. 2 years after the establishment of Haven Colony, the quarterly economic report sent shockwaves through the council chambers. The human settlement, originally projected to achieve basic self-sufficiency within 5 years, was now outproducing established colonies that had existed for centuries. Their modified power generators were providing energy outputs that exceeded council specifications by 40%, while their adaptive farming techniques had turned Haven's modest agricultural zones into the most productive in the sector. Director Walsh stood before the holographic display in the colony's command center, studying the latest shipping manifests. 17 cargo ships were lined up in orbit, waiting to take on goods that hadn't existed 2 years ago. Human innovation had transformed simple council technology into something entirely new, and the galaxy was taking notice. The Corvin delegation is requesting another meeting, his aide reported. They want to discuss your security training programs? Walsh nodded, unsurprised. Commander Blake's tactical innovations had spread far beyond Haven, the rigid military doctrines that had kept peace in the galaxy for millennia were being quietly challenged by human adaptability. 3 separate conflicts had been resolved using modified human strategies, and word was spreading through the council fleets. Blake himself was in the middle of another training session, this time with a mixed group of species. The Corvin, who had once criticized human improvisation, were now sending their best officers to learn from the humans. The lesson today was about adaptive response, the ability to change tactics in the middle of a battle based on new information. The Council teaches that predictability equals safety, Blake explained to his mixed species audience. But predictability also equals vulnerability. Your enemies know your moves before you make them. We teach something different, controlled chaos. The demonstration that followed would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for years to come. Blake's human team faced off against a traditional council formation, the kind that had won countless battles through superior firepower and disciplined execution. But the humans didn't fight the way the council expected. They adapted, improvised, turned the enemy's strengths against them. Within minutes, the traditional formation was broken. Its commanders confused and outmaneuvered. The alien observers were silent for a long moment. Then the Corvin captain stepped forward, his scarred face showing something that might have been respect. "Teach us," he said simply. In the research laboratories, Dr. Davis was making discoveries that would reshape galactic technology. His improvements to the Council's power systems had led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel, more efficient life support systems, and quantum communication networks that could span entire star systems. But each advance brought new questions, new possibilities that the Council's rigid research protocols had never considered. The quantum resonance patterns are more flexible than they realized, Davis explained to his team. They've been using the same configurations for centuries, but the underlying physics allows for dozens of variations. We could improve FTL efficiency by 60% with some simple modifications. His assistant, a brilliant young woman named Park, looked up from her calculations. The Council won't like this. They've built their entire transportation network around the current FTL standards. Changing them would require massive infrastructure upgrades. Then we'll give them something they can't refuse, Davis replied. Better technology, lower costs, improved safety. The galaxy runs on efficiency, and we're about to make everything they do more efficient. The ripple effects were already beginning. Dr. Patel's trading network had evolved into something the Council had never seen before, a truly free market. Human goods were in high demand, but more importantly, Human logistics and management techniques were revolutionizing commerce across the galaxy. Species that had traded the same products along the same routes for centuries were suddenly discovering new markets, new opportunities, new ways to prosper. The old trade guilds are losing power, Patel reported to the Colony Council. Independent traders are using our techniques to undercut established prices. The Threx Commerce Ministry is requesting consultations on supply chain optimization. Even the architects are asking questions about our economic models. The architects, the oldest species in the Council, the ones who had guided galactic development, for 3 millennia were finally paying attention to humanity. Their representatives had been silent observers for 2 years, but now they were asking questions, requesting data, studying human innovations with the intensity of scientists examining a new form of life. Ambassador Leora arrived at Haven unannounced, her diplomatic immunity allowing her to bypass the usual protocols. She found Walsh in the colony's central plaza, a space that had been transformed from a simple gathering area into a bustling marketplace where humans and aliens traded ideas as freely as goods. "This is not what we expected," she said without preamble. Walsh smiled, gesturing to the activity around them. "What did you expect? That we would sit quietly in our assigned place, grateful for whatever scraps you threw us? We expected you to follow the established order, to learn from species with thousands of years of experience, to respect the systems that have kept peace in the galaxy for longer than your civilization has existed." "And we did learn," Walsh replied. "We learned that your systems work, but they don't work as well as they could. So we improved them." Leora watched a group of young Corvin warriors practicing human tactical maneuvers under Blake's supervision. "You're destabilizing everything. The trade routes our ancestors established are being abandoned. Military doctrines that have protected the galaxy for centuries are being discarded. Research that has guided technological development for millennia is being declared obsolete." "Is that a bad thing?" Walsh asked, "or is it just change?" The question hung in the air between them. Change was something the Council had always controlled, always managed, always limited. But humanity brought change like a force of nature. Uncontrolled and uncontrollable? "The Council is dividing," Leora said quietly. "Some species see the benefits of your innovations, others see them as threats to everything we've built. The architects are ... concerned. And you, what do you see?" Leora looked around the plaza, at the bustling activity, at the mixing of species that had never interacted so freely before. "I see possibility and I see danger. Your species doesn't understand the delicate balance that keeps the galaxy stable. You change things without considering the consequences." "Maybe that's because we don't fear the consequences," Walsh replied. "Maybe that's because we believe the galaxy can handle more change than you think it can." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from the Council chambers. The Threx delegation had formally requested access to human military advisors. The Corvin were demanding expanded trade relationships. 3 minor species had announced their intention to adopt human agricultural techniques. The carefully managed economy that had sustained the galaxy for centuries was beginning to fracture. In the depths of space, on worlds that had followed the same patterns for thousands of years, beings were beginning to ask questions they had never asked before. Why did they have to trade through official channels? Why couldn't they modify their technology? Why did they have to follow protocols that clearly had room for improvement? The answer had always been simple, because that was the way things were done. But humanity had shown that things could be done differently, and the galaxy was listening. The Council's emergency session lasted for 3 days. Delegates argued, threatened, pleaded, and bargained. Some demanded immediate restrictions on human activities. Others called for expanded cooperation. The architects remained silent, their ancient minds processing implications that none of the younger species could fully grasp. Finally, a consensus emerged. Humanity would be allowed to continue their innovations, but under closer supervision. New protocols would be established, new regulations implemented, new limitations imposed. The galaxy would adapt to human presence, but slowly, carefully, safely. But as the council debated and planned, they failed to notice that the changes they were trying to control had already moved beyond their ability to manage. The galaxy was transforming, and humanity was at the center of that transformation. The careful balance that had maintained peace for 3,000 years was shifting. And once such changes began, they were almost impossible to stop. The revelation came at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time, when Captain Hayes of the Human Intelligence Division cracked the encrypted communication channels that the Council had assumed were impenetrable. What she found changed everything. Humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. They've been controlling galactic development for 3,000 years, Hayes reported to the Emergency Council meeting on Haven. The architects haven't just been guiding civilization, they've been actively suppressing it. Any species that develops too quickly, any technology that threatens their control, any innovation that might disrupt their carefully maintained order gets quietly eliminated. Governor Walsh stared at the data streams flowing across the holographic display. Trade routes that had seemed naturally evolved were actually carefully planned. Technologies that had appeared to develop organically were actually released according to predetermined schedules. The entire galactic economy was an elaborate puppet show, with the architects pulling every string. "Look at this," Hayes continued, highlighting specific data packets. "The Zilani developed quantum computing 600 years ago. The architects convinced the Council to classify it as dangerous and ban its development. The Mortex discovered zero-point energy extraction 4 centuries ago. Their research was mysteriously destroyed in what everyone believed was an accident." Dr. Davis leaned forward, his engineer's mind already grasping the implications. "They're not just maintaining order, they're preventing progress. Keeping everyone dependent on their approved technologies, their controlled systems. And now they see us as the biggest threat they've ever faced," Walsh said grimly. "Because we're not just developing new technology. We're teaching others too. Develop it too." The evidence was overwhelming. Secret meetings between architect representatives and council delegates. Plans to isolate humanity, to limit their access to other species, to gradually reduce their technological capabilities until they became as dependent as everyone else. The most chilling discovery was a classified proposal, the complete sterilization of human colonies if other methods failed. "We need to warn the others," Blake said, his military training kicking in. "The Corvin, the Villani, everyone who's been working with us. They need to know what's really happening." But Hayes shook her head. "It's too late for warnings. The architects have already moved. They've convinced the Threx that humanity is a threat to galactic stability. They've persuaded the Mendari that human innovations will destroy their traditional ways of life. They're building a coalition against us." The proof came 3 days later when Ambassador Leora arrived at Haven with a formal council delegation. But this time she was not alone. Threx security forces flanked her shuttle, and the message she carried was not one of cooperation. "By order of the Galactic Harmony Council," she announced, her voice heavy with regret, "all human colonies are to be placed under immediate protective custody. Human access to advanced technology will be suspended pending a comprehensive review of your species' readiness for galactic citizenship." Walsh stepped forward, his face calm despite the gravity of the situation. "And if we refuse? Then you will be classified as a rogue species and dealt with accordingly." The Threx commander replied, his insectoid features showing no emotion. "The peace of the galaxy must be preserved." But the galaxy was no longer the same place it had been 3 years ago. As the Threx ships moved to blockade Haven, they found themselves facing unexpected resistance. Corvin vessels, supposedly there to enforce the Council's will, instead moved to defensive positions around the human colony. Villani diplomatic ships broadcast messages of support. Even some Threx vessels broke formation, their crews refusing to fire on their human allies. "This is Captain Dex of the Corvin battle cruiser Valor," came the transmission. "We stand with humanity. The Council's actions are not honorable." The galaxy was choosing sides, and the lines were not what the architects had expected. Species that had been loyal to the Council for millennia were questioning orders they had never questioned before. The careful balance of power that had maintained stability for 3,000 years was cracking dot in the depths of space. On the hidden world that served as the architect's primary base, ancient beings gathered in chambers that had not seen such activity in centuries. They had ruled through careful manipulation, through the gradual shaping of galactic civilization according to their vision. But humanity had introduced a variable they had never encountered, the ability to inspire others, to break free from control. "The contamination is spreading," reported their primary agent. "A being whose species had been extinct for 2 millennia but whose consciousness lived on in artificial form. 17 species have openly declared support for humanity. 23. Others have ceased cooperation with Council directives. The rebellion is accelerating beyond our ability to contain it." The eldest of the architects, a creature so ancient that its original form was forgotten, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "Then we must accelerate our own plans. The purification protocols will be implemented immediately. If we cannot control the galaxy's development, we will reset it." The plan was simple in its horror, a coordinated strike against every species that had been infected by human influence. Their worlds would be sterilized, their populations eliminated, their technologies destroyed. The galaxy would be reduced to its core species, those that had remained loyal to the old order, and development would begin again under proper guidance. But the architects had made a fatal error. They had assumed that their secret war would remain secret, that their ancient authority would be respected, that the galaxy would submit to their will as it had for 3,000 years. They had not counted on humanity's gift for making allies, for inspiring others to fight for their freedom. Captain Hayes intercepted the purification orders before they could be implemented. Within hours, the evidence of the architect's plans was broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had been wavering in their support suddenly understood the true nature of the choice before them: submit to eternal control or fight for the chance to determine their own destiny. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It was not a conflict between species or ideologies, but between the old order and the new. The architects commanded vast resources, ancient weapons, and the loyalty of species that feared change more than oppression. But humanity and their allies had something the architects had never possessed: the power to inspire others to believe. In a better future, the battles raged across hundreds of star systems. Fleets clashed in the void between worlds. Planets changed hands as populations rose up against their rulers or rallied to defend the old ways. The careful trade networks that had sustained galactic civilization for millennia collapsed as species chose sides, but the war's turning point came not in space, but in the hearts and minds of beings who had lived under the architects' control for so long that they had forgotten what freedom meant. Humanity's example reminded them. The sight of humans fighting not for conquest, but for the right of all species to choose their own path inspired a galaxy-wide awakening. One by one, the architects' allies began to defect. The Threk's military command split as younger officers refused to follow orders that would destroy the very civilizations they had sworn to protect. The Mindari population voted to overthrow their government and join the Human Alliance. Even some of the architects' most loyal servants began to question whether the old order was worth preserving. The final battle took place in the hidden system where the architects had ruled from the shadows for 3 millennia. Human ships fought alongside Corvan warriors, Volani diplomats, and species that had been enemies for centuries. But the victory was not won through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. It was won when the architects themselves realized that their time was over. The galaxy had changed beyond their ability to control, and no amount of force could turn back the tide of progress that humanity had unleashed. The ancient beings who had shaped galactic civilization for 3,000 years faced a choice that they had never offered to others: adapt or be destroyed. And for the first time in their existence, they chose to adapt. The old order was dead. The new one was about to be born. The peace negotiations took place on a neutral world that had never existed before, New Harmony, a planet discovered during the war and jointly colonized by 12 different species, as a symbol of what the galaxy could become. Admiral Chun, who had led the human fleet in the final battle, sat across from representatives of every major species in the galaxy, including the architects themselves. The ancient beings had chosen new forms for the occasion, taking on shapes that could interact with the younger species without the intimidating presence of their true forms. They were still powerful, still dangerous, but for the first time in 3 millennia, they were also vulnerable. Their secret authority was broken, their hidden influence exposed, their control over galactic development ended. The old council is dead, Chun said, her voice carrying the weight of history. But we're not here to create a new form of control. We're here to build something that has never existed before, a truly free galaxy. The Threx delegate, one of the younger officers who had defected during the war, clicked his mandibles nervously. How do we prevent chaos? How do we maintain order without central authority? The same way humanity has always done it, replied Dr. Kim, the scientist who had developed the quantum communication network that now connected every world in the galaxy. Through cooperation, not control. Through mutual benefit, not imposed order. The negotiations were complex, involving not just the major species but hundreds of smaller civilizations that had been kept in the background during the Council's reign. Everyone had a voice, everyone had a vote, and everyone had the right to choose their own path. It was messy, chaotic, and utterly unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, but it worked. The new Galactic Federation was built on principles that humanity had brought to the stars: freedom of choice, open trade, shared knowledge, and the right of every species to develop according to their own nature. There were no puppet masters, no hidden controllers, no ancient beings deciding the fate of worlds from the shadows. The architects were offered a choice that they had never given to others: integration or isolation. Most chose integration, finding purpose in helping to build the new order rather than controlling it. They shared their vast knowledge freely, no longer hoarding secrets but contributing to the common good. A few chose isolation, retreating to distant worlds where they could continue their existence without interference. They're not evil, Admiral Chun explained to the human delegation. They're just old. They've lived so long that they forgot what it was like to grow, to change, to discover new things. They became gardeners instead of explorers, tending their carefully arranged galaxy like a museum exhibit. The transformation was remarkable. Within 5 years, the galaxy had seen more technological advancement than in the previous 5 centuries. Dr. Davis's improved FTL drives cut travel time between star systems by 80%. Blake's adaptive military doctrines had evolved into peacekeeping, forces that could resolve conflicts without massive loss of life. Patel's economic models had created prosperity for species that had been struggling for generations. But the greatest change was not in technology or economics. It was in the spirit of the galaxy itself. Species that had been isolated for millennia were now working together on projects that benefited everyone. The Corvins shared their military expertise with former enemies. The Villani used their diplomatic skills to resolve conflicts between worlds that had never met before. The Threx applied their precision and attention to detail to massive engineering projects that spanned multiple star systems. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had freed it. The irony was not lost on Ambassador Leora, who had become the first Director General of the new Federation. "We welcomed humanity thinking we were doing them a favor," she said during the dedication ceremony for the new capital world. "We thought we were the advanced species, the wise elders who would guide the young race to maturity. But it was the other way around. They were the ones who had something to teach us." The celebration lasted for days, with representatives from across the galaxy gathering to mark the beginning of a new era. But the real changes were happening in the quiet corners of the galaxy. In the research labs and trading posts and exploration ships where beings from dozens of species worked together toward common goals. Dr. Kim's quantum communication network had evolved into something unprecedented. A galaxy-spanning internet that allowed instant communication between any 2 points in the galaxy. Knowledge flowed freely, ideas crossed species barriers in seconds, and discoveries made on one world were immediately available to researchers everywhere else. The old trade routes that had defined galactic commerce for 3,000 years were abandoned in favor of dynamic networks that adapted to supply and demand in real time. Species that had never traded with each other before were now major partners. The Zilani finally completed their quantum computing research 600 years after the architects had forced them to abandon it. The Mortecs rebuilt their zero-point energy systems, this time with improvements suggested by human engineers and Threx precision specialists, but perhaps the most significant change was in exploration. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy was expanding again. New worlds were being discovered, new species contacted, new frontiers opened. The careful stagnation that the architects had imposed was replaced by a spirit of discovery that infected every corner of civilized space. Captain Torres, now an old man, stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Pioneer as it prepared to jump beyond the galaxy's edge. Humanity's first ambassador to the stars had volunteered for one last mission, to carry the Federation's message to whatever lay beyond the known galaxy. "Do you think we'll find others out there?" asked his young aide, a Corvan female who had grown up in the new galaxy where species mixing was commonplace. "I'm sure we will," Torres replied, watching the stars wheel past the viewport. "And when we do, we'll do what humanity has always done. We'll offer them friendship, we'll learn from them, and we'll probably end up changing everything they thought they knew about the universe." The aide laughed. "The architects won't like that." "The architects are learning to like a lot of things they never liked before," Torres said with a smile. "That's what freedom means. The right to change your mind, to grow, to become something better than you were." Back on New Harmony, the Federation Council was dealing with the challenges of governing a free galaxy. There were disputes to resolve, conflicts to mediate, and the constant challenge of balancing individual rights with collective needs. It was messy, complicated, and often frustrating. It was also wonderful. "We get a dozen new applications for membership every month," reported Director General Leora to the assembled delegates. "Species we've never heard of, civilizations that have been hiding in remote corners of the galaxy for centuries. They're coming forward because they've heard about the Federation, about what we're building here." The latest applicant was particularly interesting. A collective intelligence that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. They had been observing galactic civilization for millions of years, but had never made contact because they assumed all physical beings were bound by the same limitations they had seen in the Council. Humanity's example had convinced them that perhaps physical existence was more flexible than they had believed. "They want to contribute to our research into faster-than-light communication," Leora continued. "Their perspective on quantum mechanics is unlike anything we've encountered. Dr. Kim believes their insights could lead to instantaneous travel across galactic distances." The vote to accept the new species was unanimous, as it had been for every applicant since the Federation's founding. The galaxy had learned that diversity was strength, that different perspectives led to better solutions, that the universe was vast enough for everyone. In the research stations orbiting distant stars, in the trade centers that connected dozens of worlds, in the exploration ships pushing ever further into the unknown, the work continued. Beings who had once been enemies now worked side by side. Technologies that had been suppressed for centuries were finally reaching their potential. The galaxy was alive with possibility in a way it had not been for 3,000 years, and at the center of it all, on worlds that had once been isolated and ignored, humans continued to do what they had always done. They asked questions, they challenged assumptions, they improved everything they touched, and they inspired others to reach for something better. The Galactic Harmony Council had welcomed humanity, thinking they were adding one more species to their carefully controlled order. Instead, they had introduced a force of nature that transformed everything it encountered. The old alliance had been doomed from the moment first contact was made, not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple human belief that Things could always be better. The galaxy would never be the same. And as new signals began to arrive from other galaxies, from civilizations beyond the edge of known space, it was clear that the transformation was just beginning. Humanity had taught the galaxy to dream again. And dreams, once awakened, had a way of becoming reality.